Hi, everybody. Welcome to Descry Gaming. I'm doing a special sort of analyst guide on cranes. So, what cranes are, every faction has a type of building that produces better production overall. It Let me go into buildings here, but like for instance, Astra Militarum has a labor corp. And the key thing that these buildings do is they do usually give you a little bit of ore or influence, or every faction has slightly different resources that it generates. But the main purpose that it does is it gives you more production, far as with your well, I call them cranes. So every faction there's a different name for them, but uh, so why that could be helpful, a couple reasons. Uh, It'll allow you to build more quicker. Uh, in some cases, you know, like with AM, you're getting 4 ore plus 2 influence. Production time is 48 if I'm building. Uh, let's see, an ore extractor. So it's double. You could build 2 ore extractors for in the time it takes you to build a labor corp. Amounts to 2 ore extractors, which is giving you 12 ore compared to only 4. So yeah, but here's the thing where I believe labor corps or cranes are not to be neglected. So one thing, most factions, the only faction that doesn't require you to hard build air buildings prior to the early game. Orc's the only faction that I know of so far. I haven't looked at the new faction that was released, but uh, they can build or can build their air DACA ships out of their armory building. So that they're the only faction that can do that I know of. So why, if you go to say Astra Militarum's air building, which is called Voidport, again, it's a very 48 is very expensive. Look at say a barracks. Imperial barracks is only 36. So yeah, 48 seems to be the longest production building. And here's another thing: is building just one airport. It will be very slow for production wise, because here's how things stand in the game. In the early game, you're building up 1 city, 2 city, 3 maybe, and say in your second city or your first city, you're building production military, so barracks or armories, and so that's going to take you a lot of turns to get 2 or 3 either barracks or armories. And when you're playing PvP, you usually want to shoot for at least 3 barracks or 3 armories, sometimes 4. It depends how like when I play AM, I shoot for 4 armories if I have the ore to back it up, and then I'm basically producing a lemon rust every 2 turns. So one thing I see players do, that new players in PvP, is they either build too many production buildings and they don't have the resources to keep production going every single turn, or they have too much resources and they don't have enough production, so they might have 1 or 2 armories only or barracks, and they might have a flood of ore in the bank. So uh, I would say you want to shoot for, well, it depends on what game speed you're playing, but I think 2 turn is what you want to try to shoot for, and try to be able to keep producing every 2 turns. If you can produce every 1 turn, like a Terminator or one turn, like a high rank unit, I mean, all the merrier. But realistically, you got to have a lot of resources to do that. I mean, if you're producing a Terminator every single turn, then yeah. But it's possible. You just have to be really good with your economic resources and what you're doing on map control and loyalty relics. That being said, it's more realistic, to shoot for a 2-turn production of the mid to high tier tech units. So this segues me back into, should people bother with the cranes, aka cranes, or labor corps, or orbital relays? There are different names for each faction. So like, for instance, Chaos has, what's theirs called? Warp Forge. Okay. It's the same as AM, 4 or 2 influence. So my opinion, and I think other players in PvP community have their opinions, but I've kind of come to my opinion is it's worth it in 2 different ways, I believe. And I'm more on the fence of just doing it in one city, and I'll explain why just one city. Okay, so the first thing I would say is, if you want to try to tech to air and actually have a good air army, or a bigger air army than your opponent, there's 2 components to get that. 1, you need good research, and 2, you're obviously going to need good production, because you have to hard build these air buildings. And so if you have another warp forge or a crane, you're gonna have you're gonna be double faster than your opponent by building these buildings. Another thing you got to factor in, you also will have to be building more resources like ore, food, power. Now here's the other cool thing about Warforge. There's some factions that can get a bonus to their population, and so Chaos can sacrifice or edict with AM. SM can drop a fortress on. So SM can drop a fortress on. I'm trying to find it. I can't seem to find it on the map. There we go. So a fermentation pool. So there's many ways, factions, either through tech, through edicts, through abilities. There's ways that you can pump your population growth, and that also is very important. So if you're gonna labor corp or AKA crane, you want to make sure you have a way to grow your population quicker. Now there is a way to, if you don't really have this luxury of population growth, you can always build your population center early before you hit your cap. That way it can grow. Although I don't usually like to do that, and I'll explain why. I only do it with SM. Other factions prefer not to do that, because what happens is every time your cap grows, you take a loyalty hit. So I'm just going to show you this base here, but up here in this top left where my mouse is, so say you build a population building, so that cap is at 6 right now. It'll go up another 6, go to 12. The problem is every time over here on the, I think the left side, that grows, you take a loyalty hit down here. So negative loyalty hit. Also, your food eats up on your food. So that leads me to my other thing of why I don't recommend doing labor corps in all your cities. And because what happens is, yes, you build a labor corps, say in second, third city, you have to then build population, then you have to build loyalty. And what ends up happening is, like, what I tend to do is I'll have a dedicated production base that is just purely 3 or 4 barracks, 3 or 4 armory, and then I cap it, meaning I either deactivate my labor corp or I keep it um, at 6, and I don't want to go over it because if I just decide to build a population and continue growing that city, it's going to take more loyalty hits because the population is going up. It's going to consume more food. And when I'm building these loyalty buildings to bring it down, my loyalty back positive, it's costing me a lot of power because the loyalty buildings, where are we, are 2 power upkeep. So it's kind of like it's a trap for new players because they think, oh, you know, Descry saying cranes are good, so I'm gonna build them in all my city. And actually, well, from what I know, and most factions, I don't think it's worth it. I think you end up, uh, you know, having to build more buildings that cost power, that eats up on your food, and then you take a loyalty hit. And a lot of times, like say a second base capped at 6 with 3 to 4 armories, you're producing tanks every 2 turns. Sometimes one if you have the edict with AM. You don't need to grow the city. It's a production city. Its main purpose is just to produce tanks or produce infantry. So why would you want to increase that city where you have to like uh, build more power, build more loyalty? So to me, it's not worth it. You just want to leave it at 6. Now, what I would say is your main, generally speaking, might be a resource city. So what I would say is the labor corp in a resource city, usually the main or not, or second city, it depends how you play it. That is worth it as a growing city because if it's your resource city, you labor corp it, population, you want to build resources quickly, so power or build loyalty buildings, and you want to just keep growing that city, and keep building more resources, loyalty. That makes more sense. But to do labor corps in all 3 cities, I don't think it's worth it. The other thing I would say is, again, with that particular one city with the labor corp, you could then transition into air if you want. So my advice is really I don't think it's worth growing all your cities past population 6. I mean, maybe Necron is a little bit different because of their hero ability, but for the other factions out there, my personal opinion is to have one city as a dedicated crane city and to grow it beyond the population growth, and then keep your other 2 or 1 extra city as either specific production or specific power or research city. And that's the way I play. But all I can say is there. If the labor corps, some people think it's a waste of time, waste of resources. But honestly, it can help you get air buildings done quicker. It help you if you have, like I said, those synergies with population, such as fermentation pools, such as edicts that grow your population quicker, or abilities. It synergizes well with the faster production. So I think it works the best. Like I said, if you're growing a resource city, you can quickly build loyalty buildings, which cost more, faster, build more powers quicker, because your army is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So you need to get that rapid growth going with. So that's my takeaway. You can definitely play the game competitively without building them, but I think if you want, like, there's some players in this game that have really good economies late game, and 9 out of 10 times they build at least 1 crane. And I don't really recommend building more than 1 crane, but now some people might disagree with me, but I've done the testing. It's a lot more. you're gonna have an economic advantage the longer the game goes. Just based on the number, if you synergize it correctly with your population growth. Because the other problem is, if you don't have that population growth that you need, you're not going to keep up with the new buildings that you build. It'll be too quick, and you'll go into the red in population, which means you suffer a penalty. So once again, you have to make sure you're able, through your faction, either with a fermentation pool or a tech that you unlock, because every faction is different. You have to be able to kind of increase that growth rate, and there's some tricks to do it. Like I said, building your population center early instead of not at the cap, but I tend to not like to do that. But that's all I want to say. This is a quick guide, and I noticed some players don't even build labor corps, or they build too many of them. I think getting labor corps as early as possible will pay off the biggest, as far as if you want the game to go longer. Now, the drawbacks of going labor corps, well, if you're only doing it in one city, I don't think the drawback is as bad as some people make it out to be. But it does mean, yes, you might have to play a little more defensive. But I don't think you have to do it like crazily. But you got to remember, though, if your opponent doesn't go labor corp, then they might have a slightly bigger army than you, because they might be able to slide in one extra barracks or one extra whatever. So that's one thing to consider. But like, I think if you're good at the game, at your troop placement and defending, and if you know how to turtle, then it's definitely, I think, a good high risk or a low risk, depending how good you are at defending. What else do I want to say about it? I think yeah, see, orbital relay, the crane for Space Marine, it's all influence. Let's see, I talked about, yeah, I think I'm done talking about it. Anyways, if you guys disagree, or if you have thoughts, leave a comment. But this is strictly to PvP. I'm not talking about against the AI single player, because you could do whatever against the AI single player. This is more about going against another player at, at different skill levels. And to me, I think if you want to get your economy, or your there's different ways to have advantage in player versus player, and some of it is map control, expanding early, or having more bases than your opponent. And this is one area I think you could also put in that category. But again, there is other people that disagree with me, that think that maybe the labor corps or the cranes are a waste of time, or they put you at a disadvantage. I don't believe I believe they can, if you don't do it correctly. So once again, I stress that you have to make sure that you can grow as fast as your production. And then second is, I don't think it's a good idea building cranes in all your cities. That will really kill your production for military and science. And I would just stick with one city, preferably your resource city, not your production city. What I usually do in the early game is I'll have a designated production city, and that city doesn't bother with cranes or anything like that. It just strictly is building those production buildings. And then I'll have a resource city, and then possibly a third city, and that could be dedicated for power, dedicated to science. Depends on the faction, because some factions benefit when you go very specific focus on a city, like AM and Chaos. All right, so I'm gonna end the video here. I hope this made some sense to you people. And I will try to do a more thorough guide on different things that come up. But this is one area where I think it gets a lot of new players. And it took me a while to understand, trial and error, whether or not cranes were good or not. And from my testing, uh, they can be good in certain situations, but mainly to get the air building quicker, to have a little bit more edge going into late game against someone that doesn't. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So I will see you guys next.